Welcome, and thank you for your focus on this important issue. I want to welcome to the media studio someone who is no stranger to this place, former colleague, former Solicitor General David Turnbull. David is here as someone who has always cared a great deal about animal welfare and has a great deal of experience in the file. And I'm going to ask him to speak following my opening statement and give his perspective on this issue. And really, the purpose of this focus today is to call for a restructuring of the legislative framework of animal welfare oversight in this province. The events of this past week have undermined the public's confidence in the OSPCA. That confidence will only be restored when the public is convinced that a truly independent investigation has taken place, is told the truth about what happened in York Region, and is assured that the necessary oversight is in place to ensure that this can never happen again. Given the circumstances, such an investigation cannot be left up to the OSPCA to commission and to oversee. Yesterday, I called on the government to take control of this file through the Minister of Community Safety to appoint an independent investigator who will report back to the Minister, and that report be then tabled with the legislature. I have now raised this issue on 3 separate occasions in the House. Each time the government has refused to intervene. The first response came from the Minister of Community Safety, who attempted to wash his hands of the matter by claiming that he had no authority to intervene. He also refused to accept the information that I offered to him personally after I spoke with a number of veterinarians who were adamant that the OSPCA's planned euthanasia of the entire population of the animals sheltered at the York Region facility was not only unnecessary, but that it was wrong and that it was an offensive to their profession. Thanks to the outpouring of public opposition, the repeated appeals to the OSPCA by veterinarians to accept their assistance to deal with the ringworm outbreak, the OSPCA finally agreed to stay the planned euthanasia, but not until 99 animals had already been put down. The next 2 responses came from the acting Premier, Mr. Duncan, who defended the OSPCA's actions, asserted that the OSPCA is an independent organization capable of managing these situations, and that the government will continue to rely on them for their quote-unquote expert judgment. Well, I, along with most Ontarians, don't share the government's views. That's why I called yesterday for the government to take control of this file. Today, we're calling on the government to work with us to make the necessary legislative changes to achieve 2 objectives. First, to eliminate the inherent flaw of the current legislation, which mandates the OSPCA's object on the one hand to, and I quote, facilitate and provide for the prevention of cruelty to animals and their protection and relief therefrom, end quote. And on the other hand, makes the OSPCA responsible for enforcing the OSPCA Act. It's our belief that a charity should not have policing powers, not over itself or any other organization or entity. The OSPCA should have to decide if it's a charity with a mandate to prevent cruelty to animals, or if it wants to be in the business of inspection and enforcement. One or the other. Second is the need for effective provincial oversight of animal protection in this province, regardless of what agency may be delivering animal welfare services. It's unacceptable for a minister of the Crown to plead, and I quote, incapable of intervening, end of quote, in a decision of any agency that has a mandate legislated by the provincial government and receives funding in the millions of dollars from the government. And I remind us that the OSPCA has in fact received and been receiving millions of dollars in funding, albeit one-off, in one case, $5 million, and $500,000 for enforcement. just within the last couple of years. Any entity that is ultimately mandated with the inspection and enforcement role must be adequately funded by the province to ensure that its personnel are adequately trained and equipped to carry out those responsibilities. Currently, that's not the case. As I indicated, there is funding, but it's intermittent, it's one-off, it's not stable, and certainly doesn't respond to the specific needs that the OSPCA has repeatedly presented to the government as is needed to properly resource them to perform their enforcement duties. Certainly no charitable donation should be required to provide policing services in the province, and I believe that the many donors to the OSPCA would be shocked to know that their donations are going to enforcement and policing, and currently would in fact go to funding the investigation into the OSPCA. That is not something that people decide they're going to donate to an animal welfare agency. Finally, whatever the entity providing inspection and enforcement services, there must be a clearly defined provincial oversight of that entity. The opposition parties are willing to work with the government to achieve these objectives, and we're hopeful the government will agree to work with us to achieve the stated objectives. This is not a partisan issue. We are not looking to polarize the legislature on this. There is a practical resolution, and I believe that we can reach it very quickly. It's a matter of simply prioritizing, and as I indicated, certainly the opposition parties are ready to work with the government on this. I'm now going to ask David Turnbull to give us his perspective on this issue.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. I'm pleased that you've brought this to the media. This is a tremendously important issue for many, many people in Ontario. The tragedy in York, I think, pointed out a fundamental flaw in our system. What we have to aim for is absolutely best practices amongst all animal shelters in terms of how they handle issues like this. This requires that protocols are worked out in advance before any further recurrence of these kind of issues. We need government oversight, but clearly you have to ask yourself, who polices the police? In this particular case, the OSPCA is both the oversight and also running a charitable organization which runs an animal shelter. That's inconsistent with ensuring that animal welfare standards are maintained. I share the view with Frank that we need changes to the Act which governs the OSPCA, and I look forward to restoring confidence in the system through changes, and I would hope that all parties would agree to addressing this urgently.